countdown to the NASCAR playoffs continues on into Pocono. Welcome back to episode of MDK Racing Victory Stop. My name is Jet. Hope you're all having a wonderful Sunday. NASCAR in Pocono. Usually this has been lately, ever since the next gen car, has been a hot spot to see some exciting racing. Well, we kind of got that, but from a strategic perspective. As usual with Pocono, with the type of racing that we are expecting to see, it's not so much on-track action, but it's more or less the action that happens off the track. And this was one of those situations. This race, from a strategic point of view, if you like the strategy in racing, you love it. If you like more the being and banging, the up close, exciting racing, this race probably wasn't for you, because this was a crew chief's dream type of race. Lots of different strategies that happened throughout the race. You had many different drivers in each stage up front or doing different types of strategies. The race started off with Ty Gibbs up front leading the first few odd laps, and then his teammate Martin Truex Jr. took over the race lead and won stage one. And you already had a lot of strategy that happened right at the beginning, stage one, like Bubba Wallace, who pitted with around 2 or 3 laps ago, was within that 12-second mark, which was very key. The broadcast talked a lot about that. If you're within that 12-second mark, you can come on a pit road, do what you need to do and be able to get out ahead without going a lap down, which is what Bubba did. And a bunch of other drivers would do this. Also in stage number 2, near the end of that race, stage 2 or 3 laps ago in that stage, you saw a lot of drivers come in, pit, or some stay out. So from a strategic point of view, there was a lot of different strategies that was going on that kept the race somewhat interesting. But on the racetrack, not much was going on. At first, it seemed to be a Toyota dominating day. I mentioned a lot of drivers stayed out. Now, some drivers stayed out when Truex won stage 1. One of them was Brad Keselowski, who would take over as the race leader once stage 2 began. But then Denny Hamlin, who has been the master at Pocono, he takes over and he goes on to lead the rest of the way and win stage number 2. In the meantime, though, throughout that entire stage, again, strategy was going on. You saw a lot of drivers already going into fuel conservation mode, because we know with Pocono, always has been that type of track where you expect to see some type of fuel saving take place, the potential of a race going into a fuel mileage type of scenario. So already early on, so many drivers were already going to fuel conservation mode. But we did see some drama that happened in this race in terms of on-track accidents. Now, right at the beginning, Noah Gragson, he got into it in turn 1, spun around and backed it into the outside wall. He was out of the race. But in stage 2, a big name driver in Ross Chastain lost the car. It looked like, I don't know if he lost steering issue, mechanical failure with the car, but he lost it in turn 3 and he backed it into the wall, so much so that he was out of the race. Extremely detrimental, because he is one of those drivers that is just barely within those 2-3 spots in the playoffs. So for him, having this type of accident is extremely detrimental to his chances of trying to make it into the playoffs, which, like I said, we're now just 5 races away. Now, Denny Hamlin won the race, but he chose to stay out to get those playoff points. Now, Denny Hamlin, he stayed out to win the stage, like I said. The reason why is because, number 1, he is fighting for the regular season standings, because he is within that 20-30 race point gap from the points leader. So it makes sense for him to go out and win the stage, also earn the playoff point. While other drivers like Chris Busch or your Ryan Blaney's and so on, those types of drivers, they elected to pit to prepare for stage 3. And Chris Buescher was one of those drivers. He would end up inheriting the race lead once stage 3 began. And from that point onwards, we saw a good amount of cautions. Restarts at Pocono are always going to be insane, and we kind of saw that here. Lots of accidents happen early on in stage 3. Todd Gillen hit the wall hard, bringing out a caution after having some type of mechanical explosion. Again, that's not something that I shouldn't say we're surprised, but it's almost expected to see at a track like Pocono, especially going into turn number 1, where you're entering that corner at such high rates of speed, kind of like, brought back flashbacks of Jimmy Johnson in 2017, when you hear the explosion from McDowell's car. After that, we have our pit stop sequence, and we saw some drivers, big name drivers, get nabbed for speeding. The 5 of Larson, the 9 of Elliott, the 54 of Ty Gibbs, and the 99 of Daniel Suarez were all tagged for speeding, so they had to go to the back of the field. And that caution came out when Gilliland hit the wall at such an interesting time, because this was just outside the fuel window, which kind of, again, heightened everyone's mindset of, okay, we may go into fuel saving mode. This may be a race where you just have to stretch the fuel to the very end. Luckily, LaJoie decided to say, F that, we're going to go all out. Because on lap 121, which I believe is around 41 or so laps ago, on the restart, Kyle Busch, he makes a block, and then LaJoie decides to, you know what? Screw Busch, sends him sideways. Busch slides down to the inside grass, comes back up, takes out numerous drivers, Harrison Burton and so on, just a bunch of drivers that were taken out of this race. And on the radio, now it wasn't LaJoie that said it, but I believe it was either his crew chief or spotter that said he hooked himself, which... what are you smoking? Whoever said that, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it was a spotter or the crew chief, but what exactly are you smoking when you say something like that? He hooked himself. Yeah, he made a bold block, but what was that? You were on the bottom, then you come back up the racetrack like that. At first, I'm thinking, well, maybe it was a situation like what happened with Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott at Darlington in 2020, where Busch just wanted to come up behind Elliott, misjudged and ended up turning him. But for then, whoever it was on the 17 to then say that, I don't know, that makes me think that was intentional, or at least that was, a form of payback, kind of like 2009 at Daytona with Junior and Brian Vickers. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous for LaJoie to do something like that, because there was no need to do that. I mean, if he did it on purpose, he didn't say anything, and he probably was wise to not say anything, or else NASCAR would be on his ass to either fine him and maybe even possibly suspend him for that type of incident. But yeah, from my point of view, there was no need for that, because what good was going to gain from that? I mean, Busch made a block, but to come back up and just turn him like that, because not only did you wreck him, but you also took out a bunch of other drivers in the process. So, but this just is another punch in the gut for the 8 team, because they started this whole weekend just having problems. They had, in qualifying on Saturday, problems with power steering. Then on Sunday, they had to start at the rear of the field. They had to lose their starting position because they had to make a repair because fluid was leaking on the car when they brought the car onto pit road. For again, another, I believe it was a power steering issue or something along those lines. So that 8 team, unbelievable. I mean, I've never seen a season like this happen for Kyle Busch, ever. This is his worst season. This is worse than Kyle's rookie year. I don't care. I don't care if the numbers say that Kyle is having a slightly better season. This, from what we've seen from this 8 car, it's just time after time again. And even when the race started, they were stuck in the back. I mean, they were even getting passed by Cody Ware, for God's sakes. You know how bad you have to be to get passed by Cody Ware? They were stuck just outside the top 30 or just inside the top 30, both RCR cars. So it's just another week, once again, of RCR, specifically Kyle Busch, just having another bad week. And then when 28 laps to go on a restart, Ty Gibbs, who, like I said, led laps earlier in the race, the pole sitter, he had an engine expire in this race. Didn't hit anything, but did bring fluid onto the racetrack, which brought out a caution. And then after that, it was a battle between Ryan Blaney, Alex Bowman, and Denny Hamlin. Blaney was one of those drivers, like Chris Buescher, that pitted right before the end of stage 2. Now, Denny Hamlin, when he pitted, he elected to take fuel. Blaney did not. So those a couple seconds on pit road changed drastically the outcome of the race. That allowed Ryan Blaney to be able to cycle out in front once stage 3 began and all that, and he was able to just drive away from the field. Hamlin was able to pass Bowman, but was still about a second and a half behind Blaney. And by that time, it was too little too late. Ryan Blaney goes off to win here at Pocono for his second time in his career that he's won at Pocono, at the side of his very first Cup win, leading around 44 some odd laps to win the race and score his 12th win of the season, his second win of 2024. Here's a look at the point standings following today's race. Like I said, Blaney wins, Hamlin in second, Bowman in third, Byron in fourth, and Joey Logano the top 5. Tyler Reddick, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., Chase Elliott, who was able to rebound from that speeding penalty to 9th, and Bubba Wallace, who started the race deep in the field, started 29th, used that pit strategy at the beginning of the race to come in early to begin their pit stop sequences in the race, and was able to get a solid finish, top 10 finish for that 23 team, absolutely necessary considering the position he's in. Chris Buescher, who led laps earlier in the race, was able to finish right behind him. Keep Bubba Wallace behind basically in the point standings, not letting him out of his sight. Finishes 11th. Christopher Bell in 12th. Kyle Larson, surprisingly off day for the 5 team. I mean, I would expect him to be up front more often. I mean, yes, he did start in 12th place, but still would have expected to see Larson be much more competitive. So a rare off day for the 5 team. Eric Jones, good top 15 finisher for him, and Chase Briscoe rounds of the top 15. Daniel Suarez, Carson Hocevar, Austin Cindric, Corey LaJoie, and Josh Berry, the top 20. And then some other notables, like from here on back, they were drivers that were either caught up in incidents, or had some type of problems. From Daniel Hemrick on back, like I said, had issues. He had a suspension issue. Cody Ware had an overheating issue. And then John Hunter Nemechek, Zane Smith, Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton, Kyle Busch, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Todd Gilliland, Ross Chastain, and Noah Gragson. They were all involved in crashes in this race. Here's a look at the point standings with 5 races to go. Now, Chase Elliott, he is the points leader. That's why he's at the top of the board, but just barely 3 points ahead of his teammate, Kyle Larson. So just barely 50 points ahead of Tyler Reddick and 20 points ahead of Denny Hamlin. So 4 drivers within 20 points of each other for the regular season standings. It is getting very, very close up there as we close our way into the playoffs in Darlington. But on the right side of your screen, Martin Truex Jr. plus 137, Ty Gibbs. He was able to use that 1 race gap plus 67, even though with his engine expiring. So he's just outside that 60-point gap. Chris Buescher plus 44. But with Ross Chastain's crash, he now falls to 16th, now just 27 points ahead of Bubba Wallace. Chase Briscoe minus 75. Kyle Busch now outside the 100-point gap, minus 102 with his crash. And Todd Gilliland remains in 20th place, minus 127 below the cut line. So my thoughts on this race. Sold out crowd, although I heard that in Pocono, a lot of fans weren't able to see the race because I believe there was like a weather advisory that slowed traffic so much that a lot of fans were stuck in traffic while the race was going on, kind of similar to like Kentucky in 2011. So I feel bad for them that they weren't able to see the race or good portion of the race. Again, not much was expected from Pocono. I was expecting a banger of a race. It was, in my eyes, typical Pocono. More or less a strategy race and an actual action track. So I don't know. It's not like I was disappointed. It was just kind of like, okay, it's Pocono. I'm not expecting much out of it. So if I were to give a rating, I'd give it maybe a 6.5 out of 10, just because I wasn't expecting much from Pocono. Obviously the restarts were fun to watch, but it's a lot of the exciting moments that have happened at Pocono in recent years have all happened on restarts. So wasn't surprised by the type of racing that we saw. But tell you what, Ford has been kicking it. They've been kicking it. Ryan Blaney now 2 points, 12 playoff points to his name. I believe I saw they won 5 of the last 9 races. Keep in mind, they started the year just off by a mile. And ever since they won the All-Star race, that being Joey Logano on North Wilkesboro, they've just been on the money. Logano's been in victory lane. Cindric's been in victory lane. Blaney now twice. His second win in 5 weeks because he won at Iowa a little bit ago. So that Ford camp, specifically Team Penske, they're clicking it at the right time, especially that 12 car. Not much else to really say about this race. I mean, the usual suspects that we're not surprised to see, like your Denny Hamlin's up there. Alex Bowman, another strong finish, keeping up the momentum following his win last weekend at Chicago. That 48 team, they've been slightly getting better, but still under the radar. No one's mentioning them, but they have been getting better, just under the radar. In terms of the playoff fight, those final few spots, I mean, like I said, Ty Gibbs, now he's just outside of it, but the 54, the 17, the 1, and the 23. And maybe I can even throw in the 14 car. He's not out of the woods just yet, but it's specifically those I just mentioned. Gibbs, Chastain, Buescher, and Wallace. You could throw a blanket on all of them in terms of speed. They've all, in my eyes, have been kind of similar. Maybe not so much Gibbs. Gibbs probably been slightly better than those other 3 that I mentioned, but it's going to be very interesting to see how those 4 drivers race against each other in the final 5 races of the season. Especially interesting with next weekend at Indianapolis. I'm very curious to see how this race will go with this new car. Don't know if it's going to be exciting, but regardless, I am very interested to see how the next gen runs at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But that's all for me. It's a kind of a short episode because not much really to talk about. But until next time, I'm Jett from MDK. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.